I'd like to invite Brenda Orleans to come forward and lead us in the pledge. We'd all stand and face the flag, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we would like to recognize Tom Geekin, and Brian Shepler for participation in the Day of Hope. Brenda, your name wasn't on here.
Mayor and Council, thank you for allowing us a couple of minutes tonight. I know you have a potential long budget discussion, so we'll be really quick. But basically, we're here tonight just to thank you for your support for the Roswell Day of Hope, which you know happened on April 17th, and it was a great success. Without your support and without money from the community and businesses, this event could never happen. So what we want to do tonight is just to verbally recognize a few of the businesses that stepped up and contributed to the event. I believe most of you know Tom Schuler from Fellowship Bible Church, and he's here to do the recognitions.
Thank you, Brenda. And this is a day to just again to acknowledge and celebrate the support of City Council, support of the city and the police department, fire department, support of the business community, support of the nonprofits, and the businesses that come together to support Roswell Day of Hope. It's been a really great adventure for us for 3 years, and I'd just like to recognize a number of our business community donors, those being from even from Convoy of Hope from Springfield, Missouri, but locally, Roswell Auto, Mir Electric, Stacy Horse Realty, Land of Thousand Hills, Mims Enterprises, Marriott, Damascus Logistics, and Ron Blue, and the representatives of those companies are not here, but we have the city proclamation that we are giving to them framed and recognizing them. And beyond that, we want to give a special gift to the city council members for your support over these years, which has been now 3 years. So we'd like to present those here as we conclude.
Well, I thank you, and let's have a hand for all the sponsors of Day of Hope. Let's give them a big hand. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see what we have for a presentation. Everybody wants to open up. And we have a wonderful mug. That's not a mug, it's a glass. Wonderful, it'd be perfect for lemonade. I wouldn't drink anything else out of it. Very nice, thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilmember Wynn. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman Orleans. All in favor? Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Councilman DiPolito is absent with an excuse. First, we have appointment for the Construction Board of Adjustment and Appeals. Ari Cohn. Do we have a motion to approve Ari Cohn?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Eigelhart. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. At this time, we'll call upon our city administrator to, call upon Mr. Davidson for the first reading of the budget.
Thank you. This is an ordinance adopting a budget for fiscal year 2012 for each fund of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to Article 6, Chapter 6 of the Charter of the City, beginning July 1st, 2011, and ending June 30th, 2012, appropriating the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the item of anticipated funding sources, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures from exceeding actual funding sources and amending the Code of Ordinances to effectuate such adoption. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance. The City of Roswell, Georgia hereby adopts an expenditure budget for fiscal year 2012, said budget being described below and shown on Attachment A for each fund of the City of Roswell, Georgia. General Fund, $56,104,793. Confiscated Asset Funds, $715,588. E911 Fund, $1,621,355. Impact Fee Fund, $824,477. Cemetery Fund, $23,500. Hotel Motel Fund, $826,587. Lita Thompson Rental Fund, $63,192. Capital Projects Fund, $3,770,652. Debt Service Fund, $6,699,933. Water and Sewer Fund, $3,456,884. Stormwater Fund, $2,516,828. Solid Waste Fund, $9,801,368. Recreation Participation Fund, $4,624,468. Workers' Compensation Fund, $446,331. Group Benefit Fund, $6,844,870. Risk and Liability Fund, $863,393, for a total of $99,204,219. A millage rate of 5.345 mils is hereby established as part of the approved budget based on the estimated digest of Fulton County. The millage rate has a component of 3.949 for the general fund and a 1.396 component for the general obligation bond debt fund. This millage rate may be adjusted at a future date based on receipt of a certified digest. The budget fixes the number of budgeted full-time positions of the city at 602. This number may only be increased or decreased through approval of Mayor and Council. Mayor and Council further also adopt a capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2012 through 2016 as attached hereto and incorporated herein as Schedule B. Mayor and Council further approve the reappropriation of all capital projects listed in Schedule C. This listing is of currently appropriated capital projects which will be reappropriated as of July 1st, 2011 with the passage of this ordinance. The city administrator and his or her designee may promulgate all necessary internal rules, regulations, and policies to ensure that this budget ordinance is followed. And if approved, this will be the first reading of the ordinance.
I believe we have a short presentation by staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight I'm going to give you a brief overview of the overall budget, the general fund, and the next steps. So we begin with a general fund with a revenue budget of $56,676,339, with $18.75 million coming from property tax and $19 million from sales tax. The expenditure budget for the general fund is $56.104 million. And this particular chart provides you a breakdown by department, police being $15.9 million, transportation recreation 9.6, transportation 6.4, administration 8.09, citywide 2.9, which is the maintenance capital. Community development, $2.956 million. Environmental Public Works, $1.6 million. Finance, $2.2 million. And the fire is $6.17 million. For this, our revenues exceed our expenditures by $571,546 in the general fund. These are the items in the general fund that have not been funded that were requested. And that deputy chief police is a deputy police chief position. This is to summarize all funds. Our revenue for all funds is $100,174,841, with property tax being $25 million, charges for service being $21. That would be things related to water, solid waste, stormwater. Sales tax being $19 million. This particular pie chart provides you the breakdown of our expenditures of $99,204,000. $48 million of that, $48.5 million is related to salaries and benefits. $23.9 million is operating. $6.4 is capital. Transfers of $13.3 million, that would be for our internal service funds. Debt service of $6.69 million. And contingencies or insurance of $250,000. This is to recapture our positions of 602 for this fiscal year. There's elimination of 2 positions in the recreation department and 1 position in the detention center. And from this point, we have one more hearing on June 1st at 7 o'clock. That concludes my presentation.
Does the council have any questions? Thank you. This time we'll entertain a motion. Councilman Orleans.
I would like to move for approval of the first reading of the budget as amended. And I would like to amend Section 3, changing the millage rates from 5.345 to 5.455, with the general fund being 4.059 and the debt service, bond debt fund, being 1.396, which is equal to our current millage, and that the additional funds go into road resurfacing. So I would like to move for approval as amended.
Is there a second? Motion by Councilman Orleans, second by Councilmember Diamond. I'm going to open it up for the audience, but any comments from council before I open it up for audience comment? Councilmember Price.
This is the first I've heard of that, Mr. Orleans. Do you have any slides or presentation where we can see that?
No, I don't have any flyers. And I think I mentioned to you a couple days ago. But my thought process is that the administrator brought forth a budget did not have that rollback. I've heard concern about the number of unfunded things that we have going forward in the future. We are spending, I think, approximately a little over $500,000 this year on facility maintenance. And we cut that back last year and spread it over 2 years because we didn't have the money last year. Next year, that's going to jump up to over $1 million. And I think even Mr. Fleck has said several times that we need to keep our facilities up to date. We don't have any road resurfacing in this budget as of yet. So there are several things that are showing unfunded and going on in the future. We've got millions that we haven't funded yet. So rather than the press and the public expecting and anticipating a millage rollback before we finish this up for the second reading, I felt it was better and more objective to bring forward the current millage rate as it is in place, and then whatever changes council members want to put into the budget by the second reading can be there. A lot of times I know we go through the first reading and do things more in the second reading, but I just felt if there's a potential of the budget or the millage rate staying the same, that we should not have the misconception going out to the public. And as I said, I'm not sure we can roll back. It's going to cost us $500,000 per year. And as I've mentioned, there's several items that we're not even funding yet. So that's the thought process in this $500,000 change in the millage rate. That's why I'm also suggesting that go into road resurfacing. We have no money into road resurfacing. We need $2 million a year to go into it. So this would be the first $500,000 in this budget before any other changes are made by the second reading.
Any other comments or questions? As far as the road resurfacing, do you have the slide on the surplus every year? Did you bring that with you? And I would suggest to council where we can find that money. Keith, would you explain to council and the audience what this graph shows?
Yes, sir. At the top of this chart provides our revenues that we have collected on an annual basis since fiscal year 2005. The next line is our operating expenditures. That's absent any capital expenditures. And then the third would be our revenue over operating that we have had over the past since 2005.
So in 2005 we had an $8 million surplus. In 2006 we had a $12 million surplus from operating budget. In 2007 it was $13 million. Then it was 2008 it was a little over 10, and then 2009 it was a little over 4, and last year it was 4.
Correct, yes,
and
sir.
so every year, through conservative budgeting, we find we've got money left over after the end of the year.
But outside of capital, yes, sir.
This does not count capital. Every year, and I will tell the council in the 13 years that I have been mayor, we've never seen less than a $2 million surplus from the previous year. And I'm suggesting we fund our road resurfacing from what I would expect would be somewhere between $2 and $4 million surplus this year, which, again, in the 13 years, I've not seen it fall really below $3 million. And I don't expect it to fall. I expect there'll be plenty of money to fund road resurfacing. We can take the surplus from last year and do it. We can take the surplus from this year. So I think I appreciate the council's concern, and I appreciate your being forthcoming. But I think there is $570,000 in this budget which has not been programmed. If you believe it's appropriate to use that for road resurfacing, that's appropriate. But I believe in a economic situation when times are tough and people are tightening their belt, that the city should take the same approach. And so I would hope that that this motion not pass. And with that, any other comment before I open up the council for the audience? Councilman Orloff.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jared. We have always done a great job on the conservative budget approach. I've been on the council 19 years, so we've done it quite well for those years. And going back 2-3 years ago when things started getting crunched in the economy, we have made adjustments. We've got counties and municipalities surrounding us that are in the hole. They're looking at raising millage rates and raising taxes. I think it's great that we are in a position, because of what we've done, that we can be consistent long-term. We can keep our millage rate the same instead of lowering it one year, increasing it the next year, and being like a bouncing ball up and down. I look at the long-term approach. I've looked at the long-term approach for 19 years. As I've said, we've got other things. Road resurfacing is one example. The last several years, everybody has said how we shouldn't be taking road resurfacing out of reserves. We should get it into the operating budget. We talked about that in some of our work sessions for this budget session. So all I'm trying to do is get to a point that we've all talked about multiple times and start moving road resurfacing into our operations budget. And there may be more out of that 571 that goes into road resurfacing this year. And the balance is still going to have to come out of reserves. But I think we need to get to a point where it can get into the operating budget as best we can. Nothing is perfect, and we don't know what the year is going estimated. The other difficulty is we don't even have a tax digest solidified yet, and we don't even have it for last year yet. So we could easily have our tax digest eroded, which would add on top of that 0.11 mil. That 0.11 mil equals $500,000 to the city, which year after year can add up, versus I believe it's $14 per household, average household in the city. But again, we don't even know what that tax digest is going to be for the last couple years, let alone for this year. So I'm just trying to take that same conservative approach, long-term thinking that I've looked at for the last 19 years, and I'm trying to take that approach to it.
Keith Lee, you've made the revenue projections. You want to bring council up to date on what our revenue projections are based upon and your comfort level with our revenue projections for this coming year?
In terms of our digest, we do not have a digest. For what we have done in this budget, we did reduce the revenue by 2%, and we are 2% under what the millage rate would project for our digest to bring in terms of revenue.
So do you believe we've had this budget, which has been presented, is based upon a conservative estimate?
With the best information I have. We do not have a digest, and I do not have asked on more than one occasion for information from Fulton, and they do not have it available at this point in time.
Are we working with the best numbers that are currently available to us?
Yes, sir, I am.
And we've reduced that by 2%.
Yes, sir.
And it's already taken into account reductions that the tax assessor has done that are available today.
Based on what I've seen in terms of the appeals, those are taken into account.
All right, so Councilman Orleans, I guess there are two opinions of what conservative is. And I appreciate your position, but I think the taxpayers deserve a break this year, and we'll see how the taxpayers and the council feel. Any other comments before we continue on? Councilmember Price.
I guess, again, I know Councilman Orleans and I have had a casual discussion about these line items, and before us, though, what we were to have voted on is pretty clearly spelled out, and maybe I didn't hear you well enough, but I would just like to vote on something I can see. I mean, I need to know what is the offset. You want to leave the millage rate as it is instead of reducing it, but where does that exactly affect the other items that were requested?
To my knowledge, and Kay, you can respond to this, but to my knowledge, it affects $500,000, and that's where the $500,000 I've suggested going into road resurfacing, which will be determined, of course, by the council on any of the details of it. I just felt we should not wait until second reading to get into those details, so that will be presented in the second reading. As I said, didn't want expectations. I wanted to make sure we're on the right level, and if it changes by the second reading.
So you're saying all the other numbers are the same? That all, instead of a millage rate reduction, you want to put that money into road resurfacing? Is that the long and short of it?
Correct.
I thought you said some other things. That's why I was unsure. Did you not mention some other issues, items?
Not for that. There's still determination between now and the second reading of the $571,000 as well. That's up to council on where that's going, and that will be a discussion that's still coming up over the next week and a half. And we've got a work session tonight on some other items in the budget too, so we're still finishing up on information coming in.
Councilmember Diamond.
Thank you, sir. I love a tax break as much as anyone, and in fact, my Fulton County tax bill came out, and I'm looking at a $600 reduction just in my home, and I have to wonder how that's going to affect all of us across the board, because if I'm getting that, it's got to be pretty dramatic across our city. I believe that part of the reason we've always had an overage is that we have put off some of the maintenance things over the last few years trying to get through this time, and I think we've done a good job of that, but we have a whole lot of things that really have been pushed arguably beyond their limit, and I think we're headed for a change in service level that is a whole nother discussion that I don't think we've come to yet. I think, I've said before, I don't think anybody I've met in Roswell moved here for the lowest taxes. They moved here because of the level of service, and what Roswell is different than the rest of the areas around us. We can cut taxes to the bone, and we're not going to be East Cobb or Cherokee or some of these other places. Until we know where we're looking with Fulton County, I'm just not comfortable making this move with the idea that we may very well have to reverse it in another year. And, my history with the road resurfacing is well documented. I feel very strongly that needs to be a basic part of our budget. That's a basic city service, and we've been doing it on reserves, and that can't continue. So I would support that motion.
Any other comments? Councilman Eichelhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've had a pretty open process throughout our budget this year, and I think that's good for everyone. But frankly, this and some other cuts were sprung on us at the last minute by the mayor. And frankly, again, I think it's a kind of a game we're playing here, because we're talking $12 to $14 per your average home within Roswell, but $500,000 overall continuing into the future. And I just feel it's fiscally irresponsible at this point when we know we're going to have reductions across the board, likely in the digest, which I'm not going to put Keith on the spot for that, because we all know that there's information that we don't know exactly, but we do know quite likely that that's going to have a tremendous impact in the future. And as Ms. Diamond just said, we have a lot of things that have been spent for out of that reserve, many of which have not been done to the level which are needed. So yes, there have been surpluses, but we've always put it into things that we need, and there are many more things that we need than we have money for right now. And we just had our survey that we've done numerous times, and I forget what the number is, the large response, I can't remember that number, but of people in Roswell having the preference for a high level of service. And we will soon, in fact we're already there, getting into where we'll cut into that. And I think, again, it's fiscally irresponsible to just undercut that at this point, particularly when we know in the future it's almost positive that we will have to increase that rate, the tax rate, if we were to move forward with a reduction at this point. And I love a tax reduction as much as anyone. We've passed numerous ones in the past. But, there are some that don't make sense, and this would be one.
At this point, I have seen no projection that we're cutting services. Everything was funded in this that staff requested, other than some bonuses. All the maintenance was funded that staff requested. I don't see next year. There's a concern. Next year, I think we're expecting $1.5 million more in sales tax revenue than we received this year because of the census. So I think next year is 2013. Well,
So we won't realize that the negotiations for sales tax will not end until December 31st of 2012. So we will not realize that for the entire year, fiscal year.
So part of the fiscal year we'll receive that.
Probably 3 months of it. Yes.
3 months, and in addition, we've got how much money do we have in reserves right now? Above the reserve by policy.
Approximately $12 million.
So that gives us a total of $26 million in reserves.
Including the reserve for policy.
We have $26 million in reserves, and we're talking about $500,000. So, again, I appreciate council's concern for the future, but I haven't seen the facts to bear that out. Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's interesting that the last time we, tried to use capital, we kind of got slammed by you, but that's a different story. I think that our citizens want the best for them, and I think $14 a year reduction in the anticipation that we probably would have to go back and raise millage rates because we don't have a digest. And we have a long history of what Fulton County does to us. A long history. I mean, right now they're spending $140,000 of our money sending out revised tax forms or tax revenue, tax statements. I want to be very ultra-conservative and just wait and see our tax digest and wait and see about our sales tax digest, how that goes in 2012. And I also have to agree with Councilwoman Diamond. I think we put off our O&M, our operations and maintenance, way too long. It's kind of like, pay me now or pay me later. If we do not get our operations and maintenance under control, I'm just afraid that we're going to have to put more money out there in the next few years, and I'm not willing to do that. And I don't think that you're willing to spend, to take $14 in your pocket when you know that we can do, I think, a little maintenance and operations of our parks and our buildings that's really necessary. So I will be supporting the proposal to keep the millage rate the same.
Any other comments before we open it up to the public? Anyone in the audience wish to comment? Raise your hands. Come forward. Come forward, sir.
Leaf Lake, Martin's Landing. Mayor, we're talking about what Mr. Orleans has proposed only. We're not open. There's not questions for the entire budget.
This is for the entire budget.
Oh, I'm going to be here a while then. Okay, let me first talk about Mr. Orleans' addendum. I think we all know where this 1/10 millage rate comes from, the reduction. That is exactly what was promised us by the mayor in the last election. If the stormwater utility fund was introduced, that there would be a rollback in the millage rate. So it's a political thing. I think it's a 1/10, $18. It's a joke. $500,000 for roads. What do we average to spend on our roads? Is it not over $2 million?
Last year was 1.8.
Okay. Hand grenade, close enough? Okay. I support that amendment. Okay. Now, I want to get into some other figures. You went through that presentation so fast, and historically it was always numbers. Now it's pie charts, almost impossible to read. Can you put this up, please? Okay, good. Mr. Lee, did you or did you not present me with this a year ago? This was the pro forma I asked for? Yes. And you, thank you. Okay. So we have affirmation that this is the real picture of the city's finances. Now, I noticed in your presentation you were talking about capital of $6.4 million. Yes. Can somebody sharpen up so the council can see it? Because I need to look into those numbers. Okay, we may have to focus in on someone. At any rate, right here is 2012. This is what I'm going to be focusing on in the next few minutes. Mr. Lee, you said that, correct me, I saw the figure of $6.4 million in capital. Is that correct? Yes. On your chart. So we are going to, you're $56 million in expenditures and somewhere about the same in revenues, and we are going to use up $6.4 million from reserves for capital this year. Yes or no?
Ms. Love, can you answer that question?
You said we had $12 million in reserves?
Above the required reserve
yes,
policy.
I understand
yes,
that.
I believe the 6 point whatever number that you saw is what's in the CIP, and
Yeah.
the council has not deliberated about that. Part of that is one-time
Yes, ma'am.
capital.
Now I
A
understand.
portion of that is the $2.9 million maintenance capital that comes out of the
Very
operating
good,
budget.
very good. That's what I thought.
That's what's
Okay,
in that
good,
number, sir.
Good. So really, this budget does not include one-time capital yet?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay. Well, then I have to assume, and I think it's a pretty fair assumption, that since you took the 6.4 mil as a potential CIP total, we are actually dead on this pro forma that was presented in 2008. Right on. Let me go over these numbers. Recognize that, $1 million here or there amongst friends is relatively insignificant, right? Right there. Expenditures, $57.5 million. Where are you? 56.5?
56.1.
Okay. $1 million. Throw a hand grenade on it. That's pretty close. The next figure is the figure that includes expenditures, including capital, the $6.4 million. As a matter of fact, in that projection from 2008, it was $6.5 million. So you're only up $100,000. That's pretty darn good. 5 years passed. You're right on. So once again, expenditures are going to exceed revenues every year since 2008. That's the bottom line after you vote on the CIP. Guaranteed. That is the real picture when this is all said and done. I'm telling you right now, you can say what you want. I got $100, says I'm close. I'm within $1 million. Anybody want to take me on? No, good, thank you. I didn't think so. Okay, the next thing I want to go into is which I've talked to many people about, was this stormwater utility fund. I have several questions for that, and the main reason is because, to me, the stormwater utility fund was the newest enterprise fund. It was the new child on the block. And what I wanted to see was, how good could we do if we decided to go zero-based budgeting? So I took this as my one picture to see how effective we can actually zero-based budget and start from zero and generate an enterprise fund. I've been disappointed. And I'm going to tell you why and show you why. So I'm going to focus a lot of time on that. I'm not going to go into the $700,000 the city is going to build itself and the taxpayers are going to have to pay for, other than what that money is for. Of the $700,000, $600,000 of it is for road services. Okay, and I hope all of you see this and understand that that's where the bulk of what we're paying, asking the citizens to pay for. And as you can see, it's relatively close to the $700,000, $650,000. Okay, I was quite pleased with that. However, when we went into, I wanted to find out where we stood on the revenue and the expense side. On the expense side, again, I was quite pleased. Everything was pretty close to what was projected in 2008. These were the numbers that were projected in 2008. They have subsequently been refined, as I found out, sometime between 4:30 and 5 o'clock today, after a week's effort to get those numbers. But the real question I had was the revenue side. And I can't find my chart, but it was $2.8 million, was it not, that I was asking about? Here it is. I can't see that, but at any rate, that's $2.8 million. I was hopeful that somebody could tell me definitively where those numbers came from. Now, certainly we have the $700,000 I talked about. We have a certain amount that's coming from residents. But what I wanted to focus on was what were we going to bill our businesses. I requested information on the top 10 businesses, what their fees would be. I also wanted to know what we were going to charge our churches. And I wanted to know what we were going to charge our schools. Because I could remember some of the numbers from a few years ago. Well, I got some of that information, which is available to you all, but not a lot. What this is this. Oh, this is terrible. I can't get it in. Oh, good. At any rate, this is the monthly sanitation fee being paid by the top 6 churches. This is the reduction they'll get. I think it amounts to $11.85 per church. The reduction of sanitation fee. It's almost funny. So that there's a new sanitation fee. And then right here is the stormwater utility fee. And the numbers in yellow are the increases monthly. Luckily today I was advised that we have supposedly advised some of our churches and businesses what they can expect. I don't know how true that is because I only got this breakdown as a result of public records request, and this is a breakdown of what each and every church is going to pay. Now, the second page of this, as you can see, is unfinished. So we really didn't do a good job figuring out what all the churches were going to be paying. I'm not going to spend any more time. I can show you numbers that drive you crazy, but as I said, I was disappointed. Today I finally got figures, and the only figures that I got were figures from 2008. So since the ordinance was passed and the fee was established in 2008, although it was not implemented, the fee in 2008, basically we really haven't done a good job in figuring out where we are going to be in July of this year. And I find that very discouraging. I certainly hope that that you are upfront and honest with the businesses and the churches and the schools as rapidly as possible. My concern is that some of them might be thinking that, like the residents were advised, there wouldn't be that significant a jump. But as you could see from some of those numbers, you're talking about Kimberly-Clark. They're going to be paying $12,000 a year. Some of the churches, big churches, United Methodist, is going to pay $5,500 additionally a year. I have always objected to that approach, and I still object to it, okay? But at least, in all honesty, I hope you get that information out. Now, when I go into the expenditure side and I look at what was committed to be spent on originally and where it's going to be spent now, I do not see the funds that were originally committed. As a matter of fact, I see no funds for government compliance in the existing expenditure here. I see CIP, $789,000, which is a one-time capital, as I was advised. And of course, I see G&A, which we all know what G&A is. If you don't, that's the allocation of your administrative salaries across the board to all the other departments. I see operating expenditures down here, totaling 2.5, which is very, very close to what was projected in 2008. But I don't see any G&A, which was committed almost $800,000. And this was the whole crux of the stormwater utility, was to get compliant and maintain a 20% inspection rate mandated by state and federal government. And I don't see it here, so please, if it is there somewhere, I would appreciate somebody letting me know. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir, come forward.
You sign off on that. I'll pick it up after the meeting. That's the invoice for the public records.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for having me up here tonight. I certainly appreciate Mr. Fleck's detail. I'm not going to...
Mr. Knighton, it is our custom to identify my name and where we're from when we begin.
Beg your pardon.
I'll remind you.
I'm Mike Knighton. I live at 580 Indigo here in Roswell. And my comments are a little more high level. I'm in support of the millage rate rollback. And I have a question for Mr. Lee. I understand that we have an annual surplus, and we also have surplus over policy reserve. Is that correct? I just need clarification, specifically on the 2% that you mentioned earlier.
I'm not clear on what you're asking me. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure how to phrase it. You mentioned earlier in discussion with the mayor that, or perhaps it was the mayor who asked the question, there's anticipated to be 2% surplusage based on...
The 2% was not a surplus. The 2% was he took what we could tell from the information from Fulton County, and he reduced the projected revenues by 2% to account for potential appeals. So that wasn't a surplus. That was a lowering of the projected revenues to get a conservative projection of revenues for 2012 property tax.
Okay, super. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification. My impression after reviewing the budget is that the city has cash on hand over policy reserve that literally can't be spent if every project that we have on the books move forward. The budget accommodates, as far as I can tell, every programmatic request. It's fair. It's sustainable. I think one role of government is to assure that revenues are available to sustain the city, and I certainly appreciate Mr. Orland's perspective on that. On the other hand, let me also acknowledge Ms. Diamond. I don't mind paying an extra $14, but if it isn't needed, I'd just soon have it in my pocket. I'm in favor of transparency. Some of the things that I'm hearing right now sort of indicate that you may be in favor of continuing at the present millage rate, and to the extent that that you continue with that, I'd like to understand why we need to take more money than is needed. Again, I stand in favor of the millage rate rollback.
Anyone else wish to comment? Seeing no hands up, we're closing the public hearing on this. We have a motion and a second, a motion to approve the first reading with a Mr. Davidson, point of order. I believe we'll have a second vote on the millage rate. We've got really two readings.
That's correct. We have ordinance next coming up to adopt the millage rate, but it's also included as part of the budget ordinance.
So, Mr. Orland, we would need to amend the budget to anticipate a larger revenue.
Yes.
If they amend it. All right. So I just want to make sure
for the second reading.
All right. So the motion is to approve the budget as read with the addition as read with the amendment to change the millage rate and the expected revenue to return it to the last year's millage rate. Is that fair, Mr. Orland? And that was a motion by Orland, second by Diamond. A further discussion. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That's Orleans, Eigelhart, Wynn, and Diamond in favor. All opposed? That would be Price opposed. First reading as amended passes 4-1. And let's read the millage rate ordinance next.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to adopt the millage rate. Now therefore, the mayor and council of the city of Roswell wish to establish a millage rate of 5.345. The millage rate has a component of 3.949 for the general fund, operating and capital improvement budget, and a 1.396 mills component for servicing bonded indebtedness. The millage rate may require adjustment upon approval of a certified tax digest for the year 2011. They've approved this to be the first reading.
And I have a question before I entertain a motion. You say may be adjusted. Tell me how that would work. If we passed a millage rate and we passed a budget, what would be the latest date that it might be adjusted based upon a change in the digest?
When we get a certified digest.
So could the council adjust the millage rate after they determined if it went down, could they raise it back up? If the final rate came in and we found that as concerned by Councilmember Orleans and Diamond that it was lower than expected, could we raise the millage rate at a later time to accommodate that?
You could actually rebill if you had to, yes.
You could rebill if you had to. Now, when do we anticipate the billing to go out? When do we know when we might anticipate a final digest? Yes. Well, I'm just looking for an answer.
Yes, sir. It will be the October-November timeframe before we bill taxes. The digest, the difference this year, as in years past, is the new legislation that passed that requires every property owner to get an assessment notice. Thereby, we anticipate greater appeals will have a lot to do with the point that we get a certified digest. In years past, there has been a percentage difference that the assessor is allowed to have, and that's 3%, and we could still get a certified digest. Now, with the new legislation, that has been lifted. However, with every property owner, as opposed to basically a third of the property owners, as in the past, getting an assessment notice, the possibility of appeals is much greater. Therefore, the length of time of a certified digest is simply unknown. We can continue to bill as we have in the past. We do not require a temporary order to do that, but we don't know when that certification is going to come.
Now, as I understand it, the tax assessor has already lowered our assessment from last year. On average, it's a lower assessment than last year.
Our overall digest has declined, yes, sir.
So we've already accommodated that reduction.
For what we know, as
For what
Keith
we
said.
know, based upon it's not certified because we don't know how many appeals would be filed.
And we still have appeals outstanding from the prior tax year, so we have that in play as well.
All right. So how much do we have in play from the prior year?
Keith, do you recall that number?
I'm trying to just get what a realistic number is rather than a worst case or what's the possibilities. I'm trying to get a realistic projection here. Last year...
Well, so it's realistic. I mean, it is realistic based upon what we know. It's always been realistic. The dilemma is the unknown. Therefore, we have been conservative to account for that in the event that something happens. We didn't want to count on money from appeals. We know that those appeals from the previous year, some of them were being settled at 30 cents on the dollar, and we had to go back and take that into consideration. Do you have the number of outstanding appeals?
We have 314 outstanding commercial appeals and 141 outstanding residential appeals. They did not send me the dollar value.
Now, I understand the numbers that staff presented to me in projecting revenue was a conservative estimate. Are you saying that is no longer valid, or are we saying we've got a new number here?
No, sir, we don't have a new number. It's valid as it has been in years past. It is conservative, but it is a greater unknown this year than in years past for the reasons that I mentioned. But the numbers are valid based on our estimates at the moment.
And based upon what Mr. Davidson told me, that once we get the certified digest, if it came in below our projection, we could always adjust it, our millage rate up.
Yes, sir, that is something that has always been in place. There are administrative costs to billing again, but we certainly could.
And with $26 million in reserves, even if it comes in lower than expected, we could always cover it from reserves also, correct? Thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second further discussion. Councilman Eichelhardt. All right, do we have a motion? I've jumped ahead. I was anticipating a motion. I apologize.
Anticipating. I move for approval of a millage rate of 5.455 mils for the fiscal year 2012 budget, which would adopt a millage rate of 4.059 for the general fund maintenance operations, and 1.396 for general obligation debt. So I move for approval of this first reading.
Motion by Councilman Orleans. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wynn, and that would be 0.11 mils higher than the mayor's proposed millage rate, correct? Is that accurate? Councilman Eichelhardt.
Back to the previous comment, I think anybody, whether you want a reduction or not, would think it's ridiculous to send out 2 or 3 tax bills during any year, particularly when you're talking about $12 to $14 for your individual house on average. That just doesn't make sense fiscally, commonsensically, or if that's even a word, but you know what I'm talking about. That just doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm going to just let that go on that. But we already commented on the issues about the overall digest and the amount of money. And we've always been able to take, at any time we wanted, money from the reserves to pay for things. But we also know that in our future we have many things we cannot pay for it. And we need to have a better plan on what's looking forward for the future. And this at least keeps us on that path.
We have a motion and a second. Does anyone in the audience wish to comment? I'll get back to council after. Anyone in the audience wish to comment on it? You don't have to repeat comments from the last budget discussion. All right. Public hearing is closed. Councilmember Price.
In previous years, has that line been in there? The millage rate may require adjustment upon approval of the certified tax digest. Is that standard language in this ordinance?
Yes, it is.
Has that ever happened before?
No.
Not since I've been here.
Now, it seems, maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but it seems to me that if the concern is that we're not going to have the proper tax digest information, and that we would be afraid that we would have to raise the millage rate, wouldn't it make more sense to spend less money, reduce the millage rate, and then if we had to cover it in some other way, and as a last resort, raise the millage rate back up to the status quo? Does anybody have any response to that?
Councilmember Diamond.
That's just part of my concern. The Fulton County part of it is, well, it's certainly a concern, is just part of it. The other part of it is the things that we have put off and the things, it's not like we're floating along fine using money and having reserves. We have seriously pushed back some maintenance things that need to be done. Roofs don't get cheaper if you wait longer. Cars, we have a list of cars that are well over 10 years old and well over 100,000 miles, and we should have replaced some of them last year, and we put them off. And we can only put off our maintenance for so long before it becomes much more expensive.
Councilmember Diamond, this year's budget fully funds all the maintenance capital requests that staff came forward for the operating budget. Other comments? Councilmember Price.
I was just going to say, I have a car with 185,000 miles on it. It's doing just fine.
I wouldn't ask anybody to ride a car as old as mine. But I don't drive very far, so if it breaks down, my wife can come get me. Other comments? All right, we have a motion and a second. We've heard from the audience. Any further discussion before we take a vote? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That is Councilmember Diamond, Councilmember Wynn, Councilmember Eichelhardt, and Councilmember Orleans. in favor of the higher millage rate, and all opposed. Councilmember Price voting opposed. The first reading passes at the millage rate. Councilman Orleans described.
The current millage rate.
The current millage rate. All right, next item. Let me get my budget. It would be Admin Finance Liaison, Councilman Orleans.
Next item is approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to sign a contract with Gray Bar Electric for the provision of lamps, ballast, and fixtures for the municipal complex in the amount of $120,389.90. I think Mr. Fisher is going to answer any questions on this issue.
Yes, sir, Councilman Orleans. Thank you very much. This is part of the Energy Efficiency Community Block Grant. It is a program that we've been doing now for about a year and a half. We're replacing and updating all of our lamp fixtures within the buildings to a higher efficiency, and we've gotten bids from Gray Bar, which was the lowest responsible bidder, to actually purchase the equipment this year rather than going out to contract to purchase and install. We will be purchasing ourselves from Gray Bar and using our standby trades contractors that are managed by our building operations department to actually do the installation, since we have a number of them already under contract from being bid out earlier this previous year.
Right. Can we anticipate a lower electricity cost after we install these ballasts and fixtures?
Yes, sir.
Have y'all calculated how long it will cost to pay this back? When I say the payback, if we took the current fixtures and continued to pay the electric rate, or went with this $120,000 in the lower rate, at what point do we recover our investment? How long does it take to recover the investment?
The payback using just the electricity rate on the bulbs is a fairly long payback, more like a 10-year payback. But at the same point, percentage-wise, we're dropping our wattage usage or our electricity usage by a certain percentage, and that percentage is the savings we'll have year after year.
So do we know what the payback is? Payback period is? At what point in time do we?
Roughly 10 years.
10 years. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
Move for approval of the contract.
Motion by Councilman Orleans to approve. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Eigelhart. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Next item is approval of a settlement agreement approving payment to Fulton DeKalb Hospital Authority, known as Grady Hospital, for inmate medical services from 2006 to 2010, and budget amendment number 3226-05-23-11 in the amount of $142,506.47. And again, Mr. Roach is here to explain this. Sorry. Never assume anything.
Thank you, Councilmember Orleans. This matter seeks to resolve the city's obligation for inmate medical expenses incurred but not yet paid. We have received a list of claims that have arrived in collections and negotiated the amount down from $166,662 to the stated amount of $142,506. These are expenses that we are legally obligated to pay, and I seek your favorable recommendation on this.
How did we incur this over time? Just go to an explanation.
Mr. Mayor, my understanding, the city initially took the position that we weren't responsible for these expenses because they were health conditions that were pre-existing when the resident came to our jail. And we now understand and have been advised that we are legally responsible for payment for anything that happens while the inmates are in our care.
And the question was that some of these go back to 2006.
Yes.
So we've been having an ongoing argument with Grady since 2006?
Yes. When I got here in January, sir, this list was in my office. Staff and Human Resources and the police department were working together to identify the claims that were legitimately ours. And we've gone through and culled out the ones that we couldn't identify any custody records for, and identified the ones that we clearly are responsible for at this point.
Ms. Love, you wanted to add to that?
Yes, sir. Prior to Mr. Roach's arrival, in years past when we had simply not paid the bill and responded back to Grady that we weren't required to pay it. They had not in return billed us, and as I am sure, like many businesses in the economy and in Grady's financial situation, they went back through outstanding receivables and then began to bill us probably about a year or so ago. So we have been working and negotiating these bills and going back and verifying our records for a little over a year now. So this is the culmination of that, and this does finalize that. In the meantime, we have made some changes in our protocol about who goes to which hospital, as well as the initiation of inmate medical services 2 years ago has also helped to offset that. So it's a combination of a protocol and approach to help remedy this for the future.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Orleans.
I've asked this before. I don't know who can answer, David or Kay or Dan. But if Grady takes responsibility for indigent care of Fulton residents and DeKalb residents, and these members of our jail are also citizens of Fulton or DeKalb, my thoughts are they should be providing that service in the same way as if they walked in off the street. And again, I've asked this before, but I just don't understand why we need to pay for that services as our tax dollars are already paying for that service.
You would need to talk to the legislature about that, because they're the ones that have written the law that says that if they are in our custody, they are our responsibility and we are to pay for their medical care.
So that's a state ordinance, a state law that has addressed it that way?
Yes.
Because we are unique being based in Fulton County and having Grady here. I can see where that may not apply in other counties, but that's what that hospital is for.
Get you one way or other.
Councilmember Price.
Can we anticipate any other bills in that time frame?
No, we have gone through and asked the law firm that's representing the collections activity to specifically identify. They sent us a list of 130 claims. The settlement agreement, if I understand it correctly, says that absolves us of any responsibility for any other claims arising during that period. So this is all that's on the table for that period of time.
So we have legal recourse if anything shows up in that time frame going forward.
I believe so.
Provided they sign this release and waiver, we'll be good.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Councilmember Diamond.
To Mr. Orland's point, the good and the bad news about crime-free housing is that a lot of our prisoners aren't from Roswell or Fulton County. A number of them are Gwinnett-based, and actually sometimes most of them are not from Roswell or Fulton. So that's the up and the downside is they may not qualify under that formula either.
Any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
Unfortunately, yes. Approval. Move for approval of the settlement agreement as read.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Orleans. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time we'll call upon Councilmember Price, liaison to the Community Development Department.
The only item I have this evening is item number 7, approval of a resolution for the creation of the Strategic Economic Development Plan, SEDP, steering committee and appointment of the committee members. Alice Wakefield.
Yes, this committee will assist staff and the consultant RKG Associates in facilitating the development of the Strategic Economic Development Plan. We anticipate the kickoff meeting for the plan effort to start on June the 29th, and we will be sending separate invites out to the mayor and council.
Could you read the list of nominations? People nominated.
They are Bill Bland, Brian Chamberlain Sr., David Craig, Vince Cromwell, Kenneth Davis, Nancy Davis, Steve Handel, Alex Kaufman, Debbie Keel, Tom Liddell, Tony Landers, Stephen Moxley, Al Nash, Adam Orkin, Alfredo Ortiz, Alex Paulson, Tim Perry, David Roser, David Smith, Linda Schultz, Jay Small, and the last name is Dulden Yijinogu. I think that's it.
She's Turkish. It's a Turkish name. Dulden.
Okay.
All right. Any discussion by council? Is there a motion? Member Price.
Well, I'm just curious, because I know we're going to have to pass a resolution in addition to approving the appointees, and I guess I was just a little, I'm not sure that when we ever identified the items in the whereas number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as to the makeup of that committee.
Let's go at it this way, Mrs. Price. Do you have any amendments that you'd like to make to this motion?
No, I'm just curious because I know initially we had a listing of the types, categories of people to put on the committee, and then we modified it, and then I just don't know that we ever really arrived at any great conclusion. I guess my real concern is that we've indicated an educational component, and I'm just not sure that there's any sense to that, given that I know council did not wish to interfere in the education school board matters regarding the realignment of the school attendance zones, and the comment was made that we should not interfere in their business. So I'm just trying to figure out if council has any explanation of why we decided to put an education leader on this committee.
Does anyone wish to respond? Councilmember Dunn.
I think the purpose of this is to bring business to Roswell, and education component is about bringing education forces and bringing workforce education and all kinds of education and whatever that encompasses to it. It has very little to do with existing school matters. It has to do with reaching out to what we could bring in, and I think there are a lot of training programs and education programs, and people in that field are apprised of those things, and the whole makeup of this to me is about bringing in people who have access to people and resources within their fields to know what kind of growth there is in their industry and what kind of businesses might be able to come to Roswell.
Any other discussion? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Price, falls to you.
I know it does. Move to approve the resolution as presented in our packet, including the 22 names of appointees that were discussed in closure last meeting.
Those are the same as the names read, correct?
Same as the names read.
I'm not talking about what was discussion closure, but the names that you're bringing forward to be nominated are the names that Alice Wakefield read.
Correct. Those are the names
that
came out of closure as it was discussed not in a general council meeting, yes.
All right, we have a motion to approve the resolution with the names read. Do we have a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time we'll call upon Councilmember Kent Eigelhart, the liaison to Recreation and Parks Department.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The agenda item tonight is two things that will ultimately put a roof on the stage down at the Riverside Park. And you'll notice on there it says, well, actually, if you're looking at the agenda, is presented by Joe Glover. But Mr. Glover's not here tonight because, as we've been informed, he is at the hospital waiting for his daughter-in-law to give him, Morgan may have an update on that. But
he does. He has an 8-pound, 8-ounce granddaughter.
Congratulations, Joe.
So that's exciting. So Morgan was not expecting to be here tonight because this is his day off, but he put on a tie and came down here. So actually, Mrs. Love is going to be the one to get over this detail. But Morgan, would you like to come up to the podium just because you came all the way down here?
It looks so nice in this.
But obviously exciting news for Mr. Glover and his family. But we will let Ms. Love tell us about this.
Thank you, Councilman Reinhardt. This item is approval to sign a contract with Southern Wood Systems to manufacture a stage roof for the Riverside Park stage in the amount of $59,022. It also includes a budget amendment in the amount of $98,512. This is a 60 by 40 wooden post structure with wood roof with shingles. We will purchase the roof system from Southern Wood Systems, and the plan is to utilize our on-call or standby trades contractors to actually pour the footings and construct the prefab roof. We think that weather permitting and approval tonight, that it will be completed in mid-September.
What would the overall cost be for this project?
Mr. Mayor, I believe it will be with this 100. I'll have to get the exact number. It's a little over $100,000.
So is that in addition, or does that include the current engineering? The engineering we've already done?
Includes the engineering we've already done.
Right, so the total, start to finish, is about $100,000.
120 probably, including the engineering. I will get the exact number.
Start to finish, we will have spent about $120,000 on this project.
I'll get the exact amount, but it is in that neighborhood, yes, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll move for approval of both, if it's acceptable to make a single motion for approval to sign a contract with Southern Wood Systems to manufacture the roof system, the amount of $59,022, and the approval of budget amendment in the amount of $98,512.
We have a motion by Councilmember Eichelhart to approve the purchase of the system and to amend the budget. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Wynn. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Councilman Orleans, that passes unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Eichelhart.
I believe there's no need for a closure tonight, so the meeting is adjourned. Oh, we have a work session. There is a need for a work session on budget. I'm not sure what we'll discuss there, but we'll listen. Moving right along.